Okay, so this is the fifth and final video in the series on percents, okay? So what we've talked about so far in the first video, we talked about what is a percent and how to convert between percents, decimals, and fractions. All three of those represent part of a whole, so it makes sense to learn how to convert between the three. Next, we talked about how to just solve a simple percent problem. So we talked about what's the amount, what's the base, what's the percent, and then how that would work using a percent equation or the percent proportion. We then started talking about problem solving. So solving just basic percent problems, and then we got a little bit more specific. We looked at percent of increase, percent of decrease, sales tax, discount, and commission. For this video, what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about simple interest. Now, simple interest is going to be completely different from all of the other problem solving that we did. And in that, what I mean is we can't use the percent equation or the percent proportion anymore. Okay, we're going to have a formula that we have to use. So you need to just scrap that idea of figuring out what the amount, the base, and the percent are and plugging them into either the equation formula or the proportion formula. All of that doesn't count here. Okay, but we do teach this right now because we're going to be dealing with interest rates, and interest rates are percents. So let's take a look at simple interest. Okay, so in case you don't know, interest is money earned on an investment or money paid on a loan. Okay, so basically you have some money. Let's say somebody in your family passed away, they leave you a little inheritance. You don't want to blow it all, so you're going to put it in some kind of account. Okay, that account, since you're letting the bank basically use your money while you aren't, the bank will then in turn pay you a little tiny bit of a fee. So you can earn a little bit of money on your investment. So that interest is a positive for you. It adds to the value of your account. On the other hand, let's say that your car blows up, you need to buy a new one, but you don't have the cash on hand to buy a new car. So you go to the bank and you're like, hey, could I borrow $15,000? They're like, sure, of course, but we're going to charge you a fee. So they'll come up with some type of interest rate and some type of time frame for you to pay that loan back. But in this case, the interest is a negative for you. It's extra money that you have to pay. Okay, now for us, again, I told you at the introduction of this video, we can no longer use the percent equation or the percent proportion, but we do have a formula. Okay, and I'm only going to use one formula in this particular video. If you take other math classes, they might use additional types of formulas. We're only going to look at simple interest. We're only going to look at the simple interest formula. We're not going to look at different iterations of the formula. Instead, we're going to use this one formula and just use kind of intuition on how to get other values. Instead of just using new formulas, we're going to do everything kind of from scratch. Okay, so again, if you take another math class in the future, I wouldn't even say you might, you'll very likely see several interest formulas or several simple interest or even compound interest formulas, but for now we're just going to use one, and the formula is I equals PRT. So I is the interest, and it's going to be a dollar amount. All right. P is the principal. This is the initial value borrowed or invested. And then you have R, which is your interest rate. All right. And this will be used in the formula in decimal format. So you're always going to take your percent and you're going to convert it to a decimal before you plug it into this formula, I equals PRT. And then T is the time frame of the loan or the investment. Generally, it's in years, unless otherwise stated. Okay, so you're gonna have some kind of time frame on an investment. You might invest your money for 10 years. You might invest your money for 30 years. On a loan, the bank might give you 18 months to pay back, or it might give you 3 years, or it might give you 6 years to pay back the loan. It's all just going to depend. So you have to read into the problem very carefully. Now, for us, we generally look at loans. Okay, so I'm going to focus much more on loans. I'm not really going to do too much in the way of investing. Okay, so we'll do a couple of investings, but we're going to look a little bit deeper at the loans. Okay, so a couple of things I want to tell you about the loan. All right, you need to have information about the loan, the principal, the interest rate, and the time frame. But I equals PRT calculates the interest. So for the interest calculation, use I equals PRT. For the total amount owed, we have the principal, which is generally given, plus the interest. And in a lot of cases, when you have a situation where you're talking about borrowing money for a loan, we will look at a monthly payment. So the monthly payment equals the total amount owed divided by the months in the loan. Okay, so that's kind of 3 parts to a lot of these problems. You generally first have to calculate the interest. You then have to calculate the total amount owed. And then in a lot of cases, you'll then calculate the monthly payment. So let's look at a few examples. Okay, so first up, let's say you borrow $5,000 at 7.5% for 2 years. Okay, so the first thing I want to know, let me change this to a 1, and then I can use A, B, and C. There. So the first thing you want to know is how much interest will you pay? Okay, so we're going to use interest equals the principal, which is the amount you're borrowing. That's the 5,000 times the interest rate. And remember, the interest rate has to be written in decimal format. So what would I do to 7.5% to turn it into a decimal? Well, I would move my decimal to the left twice. So 7.5% is the same as 0.075. And then I want to multiply this by the time. So remember, it's principal times rate times time. And in this case, the time is 2 because we're going to use 2 years. Remember, on the previous slide, I said that time is the time frame, and it's generally in years unless otherwise stated. So in some cases, you might have a monthly interest rate versus an annual interest rate. If nothing is stated, you can assume it's annual. All right, so let's figure out the interest that we're going to owe on this loan. So I'm going to take my calculator, 5,000 times 0.075 times 2. And over the course of 2 years, I'm going to have to pay an additional $750. So that leads us to part B. What is the total amount owed? Well, we want to take the principal, which is what we're initially borrowing, and then to that we have to add the interest that we're going to have to pay. So over the course of 2 years, we're actually going to end up paying back $5,750. So that's the interest, the $750. The total amount that we have to pay back over the course of 2 years is $5,750. So next up, what is the monthly payment? Well, first of all, we need to figure out the number of months. Well, we have 2 years to pay back this loan. And for each of 2 years, we have 12 months. So total, we're going to have 24 months to pay back this loan. Okay, so the monthly payment is going to be the result from part B, the total amount owed, $5,750. And we have 24 months to make this happen. So we take the 5,750, we divide it by 24. And I end up getting 239.583 repeating. So we're going to say our monthly payment is 239.58. You definitely want to round. So our monthly payment there is $239.58. Let's go ahead and look at another example. Okay, so for the next example, you borrow $12,000 at 4.75% for 6 years. So the first thing we want to do is figure out the interest. So the interest is going to be the principal amount borrowed times the interest rate as a decimal, so 0.0475 times the number of years, 6, and then just use your calculator to work this out. One thing I do ask as the instructor for my students when I have them work out stuff on a quiz, a lab, a test, whatever, I have them show their work. At something like this, I certainly wouldn't expect you to figure out what 12,000 times 0.0475 times 6 is. Okay, I would absolutely expect you to use your calculator, but I still want to show you, I want you to show your setup. So show what I have shown so far, and then the 0.0475 times 6 times 12,000, you could do on your calculator. So the interest owed on this loan is going to be $3,420. Now what we want to do is we want to determine how much we're going to have to pay back total. So the total is going to be the $12,000 that we're borrowing initially, plus all of that interest. So the total amount of this loan is $15,420. So over the course of the 6 years on this loan, we're going to have to pay back in total $15,420. So for the monthly payment, let's do a little work. For the monthly payment, the first thing we want to do is figure out the total number of months. Okay. Well, we've got 6 years. Each year has 12 months. So we have a total of 72 months to pay back this loan. Okay. So then the monthly payment is going to be the total amount borrowed, which is 15,420, divided by the total number of months on the loan. So 15,420 divided by 72, I get, and I'm going to round, so I'm going to get $214, and then I get so I get 214.16 repeating. Well, if I get 16 repeating, that means when I round this, I'm going to get $214.17. The fact that the 6 repeats tells me that I'm going to round up. So there is my final monthly payment on this loan. Okay. Another example, let's say for our third example that you borrow $22,500 at 3.2% for 10 years. First things first, let's go ahead and figure out the interest we will owe. So we take the principal amount borrowed, $22,500. We multiply it by the interest rate, which as a decimal would be 0.032. And then we multiply it by the number of years in the loan. Show that step right there, and then you can use your calculator. And we're going to end up owing over the course of 7 years, we're going to have to owe an additional $7,200. Okay. So that's a lot of extra money to pay back over the course of 10 years. Next thing we want to do is figure out the entire amount that we're going to have to pay back. So the total here is going to be the principal borrowed, which is $22,500, plus all of that interest. Okay. So finally, we're going to end up borrowing, or not borrowing, we're going to end up paying back $29,700. Okay. So when you go to calculate your monthly payment, you need to use the total amount paid. So the principal plus the interest. Now for the monthly payment, we first need to figure out the number of months. So we've got 10 years to pay this back. Each of those 10 years has 12 months. So we basically are going to be making 120 different payments of equal amounts. So the payment is going to be the total amount that we have to pay back divided by the number of months we have to pay it. So we get 29,700 divided by 120. And in this case, we get a nice pretty number. Our monthly payment is going to be $247.50. Okay. Now, not all interest problems are going to ask you for the interest, the total amount paid, and the monthly payment, but it is worth knowing how to do all three parts of this problem. Let's do one more, and then we'll do maybe two where we look at an investment instead of a loan. So for our fourth problem, let's say that you borrow 100,000 at 3.25% for 20 years. This sounds more like a loan for a house, okay? Loans on homes are usually for like 20 or 30 years, okay? So first up, we want to figure out how much interest we're going to have to pay. Well, we take the principal amount borrowed, we multiply it by the interest rate as a decimal, so 0.0325 times 20. So over the course of these 20 years, we're going to pay back in total $65,000. All right, so that house that originally was going to cost you $100,000, at the end of 20 years, you're going to end up paying $165,000. So the total paid is the $100,000 that you originally borrowed, plus all of that interest you're going to owe the bank. So in this case, $165,000. Okay. Now for the monthly payment, we have 20 years to pay this back. Each of those 20 years has 12 months. So we're basically going to have to make 240 equal payments on this loan. So the payment is going to be the total paid, which is the $165,000 divided by the total number of months you have to pay back. So 165,000 divided by 240 is $687.50. There you have it. Now, if you take a higher level math class or a math class that does a finance unit, you will find that simple interest is not used a lot, especially for like mortgages and stuff. Okay, so there are definitely other formulas out there. Simple interest is very basic. It's usually the starter point for any kind of personal finance unit. Okay, just know that there are other much bigger formulas that you'll use, you know, in potential personal finance units and other math classes. Okay, now for this next one, we're going to look at investing. So let's say that you came upon $25,000. So you invest $25,000 at 2.2% for 30 years. How much money will be in your account at the end of 30 years? Well, a problem like this is only going to have two parts. We would need to calculate the interest and then calculate the future value of this investment. The future value is kind of like how much you'll finally have in that account at the end. So the first thing I want to do is find the interest. So I'm going to take the principal amount invested. I'm going to multiply it by my interest rate as a decimal, so 0.022. And then I'm going to multiply it by the time frame, in this case, 30 years. So 25,000 times 0.022 times 30, I think I said 25 years, 30 years, we get that we're going to earn interest of 16,500. So how much is in the account? after 30 years? Well, we would have the original investment of $25,000. So that's, of course, still in the account. But then we have this additional $16,500 that we earned in interest. Okay. So the total amount in the account after 30 years would then be $41,500. And that's it. Do this in blue. All right. So you've got your interest and the total value in your account. Let's do one more problem. Okay. So for the last problem, let's pretend that a set of parents is getting ready to have a baby. So a set of parents is preparing for the birth of their child. The parents decide, whoops, hold tight. Okay, sorry about that awkward pause. I got a phone call that I couldn't ignore. Okay, so a set of parents is preparing for the birth of their child. The parents decide to set up a college fund by investing $15,000 in an account that earns 2.5%. How much will be in this account after 18 years? So we're kind of imagining this kid has 18 years to decide to go to college. How much will be in this account? So kind of like the previous example, we want to start by finding the interest that this account would earn. So we're investing 15,000. So we're going to take the principal, 15,000. We're going to multiply it by the interest rate, 0.025. And then we're going to multiply it by the number of years on this investment, which would be 18. We're hoping to have some money set up so this kid can get a good start to college. So we multiply this out, and 15,000 times 0.025 times 18 would be, that's not correct. Oh, I was like, that doesn't sound right. I typed it in wrong. So 15,000 times 0.025 times 18, we would get 6,750. So that's the amount of interest this account is set to earn. All right. So then we ask ourselves, well, how much is in the account? So the total in the account is going to be the 15,000 that was originally invested plus the interest of 6,750. And that would put us at $21,750. So that would be a nice little chunk of money for this particular kid to at least start his college or her college career. Okay, so quick recap. We have that simple interest is it's just going to be money earned on an investment or money paid on a loan. The simple interest formula is I equals PRT. I equals the dollar value of the interest. P is the principal, so that's the initial value borrowed or the initial amount invested. The interest rate is R, and that's used as, it's going to be used in the formula in its decimal format. And then the time frame is T, which is generally in years unless otherwise stated. We looked at examples where we calculated the interest, the total amount owed, and the monthly payment on a loan. And then we finally looked at also investments. So how much did you invest initially? We would use that to determine the interest earned over a certain time frame, and then we could determine how much is in the account after a certain time frame. Okay, so that pretty well wraps up percents. Okay, there's certainly tons and tons and tons of types of percent problems. Okay, all sorts of examples that we could use. So the big thing with just a generic percent problem is determining the amount, the base, and the percent. And then once you find the amount, the base, and the percent, you can use the percent equation or the percent proportion. The oddball here is what we talked about in this video, interest. You don't use the percent equation or the percent proportion. Instead, you use formulas. At this point, I only showed you the simple interest formula. If you do take other math classes where you do like a personal finance unit, you're going to see tons and tons of formulas for interest, and they calculate different things. Okay, this is just a start, just to kind of give you an introduction to what interest is. Okay, so after this unit, I think we're going to look at measurement. All right, best of luck.